They don't care about us, Miss Hayes. So why should we care about them? The words came from 12-year-old Marcus, who slouched at the back of the classroom with his arms crossed, his voice filled with defiance. The other students nodded in agreement, their eyes dull with resignation. Miss Eleanor Hayes stood at the front of the classroom, clutching a piece of chalk in her trembling hand. Her eyes swept over the tired faces of her students. This wasn't the first time she had heard such words, but today, they hit harder than usual. The year was 1965, and the small southern town of Riverton was a place where progress came grudgingly, if at all. The local school for black children, Riverton Academy, was more a relic than an institution, a crumbling building with leaky roofs, broken desks, and textbooks so outdated they still referred to slavery as a peculiar institution. Eleanor had been teaching there for 10 years, pouring her heart into every lesson, every student, and every long, exhausting day. But now, staring at Marcus and his classmates, she wondered if it was enough. Because, she said finally, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, if we don't care, who will? Riverton Academy was a world apart from the white schools across town. There, students had pristine facilities, modern equipment, and teachers who could afford to focus on more than just survival. At Riverton, Eleanor was not just a teacher, she was a counselor, a nurse, and sometimes even a parent. Her students were bright, brimming with untapped potential. But they were also weary, worn down by a system that treated them as afterthoughts, if it acknowledged them at all. Marcus was one of her brightest students, but he was also one of her most challenging. His mother worked 3 jobs to support their family, and his father had been jailed on dubious charges. By the time he arrived at school each morning, he was already carrying the weight of the world on his small shoulders. Eleanor had tried everything to reach him, extra tutoring, encouraging words, even letting him stay after school to talk. But his walls were high, and she wasn't sure how to break through. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor stayed late at the school, grading papers by the dim light of her desk lamp. The rain drummed steadily against the windows, and the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. She was halfway through Marcus's math test, another failed attempt, when she noticed something unusual. Scrawled in the margins were tiny, intricate drawings. They were rough but full of life, a man in a suit holding a briefcase, a child on a swing, a house surrounded by trees. Eleanor stared at the drawings, her heart quickening. She had never seen this side of Marcus before. The next day, she pulled him aside after class. "Marcus," she said, holding up the test, "these drawings, did you do them?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah, so what? They're incredible," she said, her voice sincere. "You have real talent." Marcus glanced at her, his tough exterior cracking just slightly. "It's just something I do." "Don't mean nothing." "It means something to me," Eleanor said firmly. "And I think it could mean something to you too." That evening, Eleanor sat at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by the stacks of papers and books that seemed to consume her life. But tonight, her mind wasn't on lesson plans or test scores. She thought about Marcus, about the spark she had seen in his drawings. She thought about all her students, each one a diamond in the rough, waiting for someone to polish them. And then, an idea began to form. The next morning, Eleanor marched into the principal's office. Mr. Harold Winthrop was a portly man with a gruff demeanor and a perpetual cigar dangling from his lips. He looked up from his newspaper with a raised eyebrow. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism, "what brings you here?" "I want to start an arts program," she said without hesitation. Winthrop barked a laugh. "An arts program? In this school? We barely have money for pencils and paper." "I'll do it on my own time," Eleanor insisted. "And I'll find the supplies myself. The children need this, Mr. Winthrop. They need a reason to believe in themselves." Winthrop sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You're a stubborn woman, Miss Hayes. Fine. Do what you want. Just don't expect any help from me." Eleanor threw herself into the project with everything she had. She begged local businesses for donations, scoured second-hand stores for supplies, and even spent her own meager salary on paints, brushes, and paper. The first class was small, just Marcus and a few other students who stayed after school out of curiosity. Eleanor didn't start with grand speeches or lofty expectations. She simply handed them brushes and told them to paint whatever was in their hearts. Marcus was hesitant at first, his strokes clumsy and unsure. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. He began to pour himself into his work, creating pieces that captured the beauty and pain of his world. The other students followed his lead, their artwork transforming the barren classroom into a gallery of dreams and emotions. For the first time, Riverton Academy felt alive. Word of Eleanor's program began to spread, and not everyone was pleased. Some parents worried it was a distraction from real subjects like math and reading. Others saw it as a waste of time and resources. But the harshest criticism came from outside the Black community. One day, Eleanor found a letter slipped under her classroom door. The handwriting was jagged, the words filled with venom. "You're filling their heads with ideas they don't need. Know your place, Miss Hayes." Eleanor read the letter twice, her hands shaking. She considered going to the police, but she knew it would lead nowhere. In Riverton, justice was a luxury few could afford. Instead, she folded the letter neatly and tucked it into her desk. Then she picked up a paintbrush and joined her students. Eleanor's art program grew faster than she could have imagined. What began as a small after-school experiment soon became the talk of Riverton Academy. Students who had once struggled to sit through a lesson now stayed after class eagerly, their hands streaked with paint and their eyes bright with excitement. Marcus, who had once been one of the most withdrawn and defiant students, emerged as a leader in the program. His drawings grew more intricate, and his confidence blossomed with each new piece he created. One afternoon, Eleanor found him sketching a mural on the back wall of the classroom. "What's this?" she asked, her tone light. "It's us," Marcus said hesitantly, stepping aside to reveal his work. The mural depicted a group of children standing in a field, their arms stretched upward as if reaching for the stars. Above them, a canopy of vibrant colors swirled together, each shade blending seamlessly into the next. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, her voice catching. Marcus shrugged, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. "It's not done yet. But I think it shows how we can be more, you know. If we just try." The mural became the centerpiece of the program, drawing attention from teachers, parents, and even the local pastor, Reverend Jameson. "This is more than art," Reverend Jameson said one evening as he stood in the classroom, his gaze fixed on the mural. "This is hope. These children are seeing themselves in a way they've never been allowed to before." Eleanor felt the weight of his words. The mural wasn't just a painting, it was a symbol of what her students could achieve if they were given the chance. But not everyone shared Reverend Jameson's enthusiasm. The letter under Eleanor's door was only the beginning. Soon, whispers began to circulate through the town. Parents from the white school across town complained that Riverton Academy was being given too much attention. At a school board meeting, a man named Walter Grayson, a prominent businessman with deep pockets and even deeper biases, stood up to voice his disapproval. "This is a distraction," Grayson said, his voice booming. "These children need discipline, not painting lessons. What good will this art do when they're out in the real world?" Eleanor, who was seated in the back of the room, clenched her fists. She wanted to stand up, to defend her students, but she knew her words would fall on deaf ears. Instead, she focused on what she could control, her classroom. One evening, as Eleanor was locking up the school, she noticed Marcus waiting for her by the steps. He held a folded piece of paper in his hands, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "What's this?" Eleanor asked, taking the paper. "It's a flyer," Marcus said. I thought maybe we could do an art show. You know, to show people what we've been working on." Eleanor unfolded the flyer. It was hand-drawn but remarkably polished, with bold lettering that read, "Riverton Academy Presents, a Night of Art and Hope." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes. "Marcus, this is incredible. But are you sure you're ready for this? It's a big step." Marcus nodded. "We have to show them, Miss Hayes. We have to make them see us." The weeks leading up to the art show were a whirlwind of activity. Students worked late into the evenings, perfecting their pieces and preparing the classroom for what they hoped would be a crowd. Eleanor used every connection she had to spread the word. She wrote letters to local churches, knocked on doors in the neighborhood, and even convinced the skeptical principal, Mr. Winthrop, to let her borrow chairs and tables from the storage closet. The night of the show arrived with a buzz of anticipation. The classroom was transformed into a gallery, with paintings and sculptures displayed on every available surface. The mural on the back wall shone brighter than ever, its colors illuminated by strings of borrowed lights. As the first guests trickled in, Eleanor's heart pounded. She had no idea how the town would react, or if anyone from outside the ridge would even show up. But soon, the trickle became a steady stream. Families, churchgoers, and even a few teachers from the white school across town wandered in, their expressions shifting from skepticism to amazement as they took in the students' work. This is incredible," Reverend Jameson said, his voice filled with awe as he studied a painting by a shy girl named Celeste. "These children have real talent." By the end of the night, the room was filled with applause and laughter. Marcus stood by the mural, his chin held high as people stopped to compliment his work. For the first time, he looked like he believed in himself. Not everyone was pleased with the success of the art show. Walter Grayson, who had refused to attend, heard about the event from his wife and dismissed it as a flash in the pan. But something had shifted in Riverton. The students of Riverton Academy had shown the town their potential, and it was a moment that couldn't be ignored. The art show sparked a wave of change at Riverton Academy. Eleanor's program, which had once been dismissed as a pipe dream, became a cornerstone of the school. Local churches began donating supplies, and a retired artist from the neighborhood volunteered to teach a weekly class. Even Principal Winthrop, who had been indifferent at best, started to take pride in the program. As for Marcus, he became a shining example of what the program could achieve. His mural was featured in the local paper, and a teacher from the white school reached out to offer him private lessons. But Eleanor knew the fight wasn't over. Riverton was still a divided town, and progress came slowly. One day, Eleanor received a letter in the mail. Unlike the hateful notes she had received in the past, this one was written in neat, careful handwriting. "Dear Miss Hayes," it began, "I wanted to thank you for what you've done for my son. Marcus talks about you all the time, and I can see how much he's grown because of your program. You've given him hope, and for that, I'll always be grateful." The letter was signed by Marcus's mother, and Eleanor held it tightly, tears streaming down her face. Despite the glowing praise after the art show, Eleanor's fight was far from over. The program's success had drawn attention not only from supporters but also from critics who felt threatened by the shift in focus toward Riverton Academy. A week after the event, Eleanor was summoned to a meeting with the school board. As she entered the room, she was met with the cold stares of men in dark suits, their skepticism palpable. "Miss Hayes," began Walter Grayson, who sat at the head of the table, "while we acknowledge the enthusiasm surrounding your program, we have concerns about its impact on academic performance." Eleanor straightened her back, refusing to let his words shake her. "With all due respect, Mr. Grayson, this program has done more than just inspire my students. It's given them confidence, purpose, and a reason to engage in their education." Grayson smirked, his tone condescending. "Confidence doesn't pay the bills, Miss Hayes. And it certainly doesn't prepare them for the real world." Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Art teaches more than technique, Mr. Grayson. It teaches discipline, creativity, and the ability to express oneself. These children need those skills just as much as they need math and reading." The debate raged for nearly an hour, with Eleanor defending her program against a barrage of questions and thinly veiled insults. By the end, her voice was hoarse, but her resolve was stronger than ever. As she left the meeting, she caught a glimpse of Marcus standing in the hallway, his face anxious. "What happened?" he asked. Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, Marcus. They're not shutting us down." Eleanor knew that the best way to silence her critics was to show the tangible impact of her program. She began working with the students to organize a new project, a mural that would stretch across the outer wall of the school. The mural would tell the story of Riverton, its struggles, its people, and its potential for change. Eleanor assigned sections of the mural to different students, encouraging them to incorporate their own experiences and ideas. Marcus took on one of the most prominent sections, depicting a young boy standing in a barren field, his hand outstretched toward a blossoming tree in the distance. "This is us," Marcus explained as he worked. "We're reaching for something better." Word of the project spread, and soon, members of the community began showing up to watch the mural take shape. Some even volunteered to help, bringing supplies or painting alongside the students. One afternoon, Earl Watkins, a white farmer from the outskirts of town, showed up with a bucket of paint and a roller. "I'm not much of an artist," Earl said, his voice gruff, "but I figured I could at least help with the background." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling. "We'd be glad to have you, Mr. Watkins." The growing support for the program only fueled resentment among its detractors. One morning, Eleanor arrived at the school to find the mural defaced. Ugly words were scrawled across the wall in bright red paint, and parts of the artwork had been smeared beyond recognition. The students were devastated. Marcus stood frozen in front of his ruined section, his fists clenched at his sides. "Why do they hate us so much?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because they're afraid of what you represent. They're afraid of change." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes blazing with determination. "Then we'll paint it again. And this time, we'll make it even better." Eleanor felt a surge of pride. "That's the spirit, Marcus." The entire school rallied behind the project, working tirelessly to repair the damage. The vandalism, intended to break their spirits, only strengthened their resolve. By the time the mural was finished, it had become a masterpiece. The barren field in Marcus's section now blossomed with trees, each branch representing a different dream or aspiration. A section painted by Celeste showed children of all races holding hands, their faces filled with joy. When the mural was unveiled, the crowd that gathered to see it was larger than Eleanor had ever imagined. Families from across Riverton, both black and white, stood side by side, their differences momentarily set aside as they admired the students' work. Reverend Jameson stepped forward to address the crowd. "This mural isn't just paint on a wall," he said, his voice ringing out. "It's a testament to what we can achieve when we come together. These children have shown us the best of ourselves." The applause was thunderous, and for the first time, Eleanor felt that Riverton was truly changing. Years later, the mural would still stand as a symbol of resilience and hope. Eleanor continued to teach at Riverton Academy, her program expanding to include music, theater, and poetry. Marcus went on to become an artist, his work displayed in galleries across the country. But no matter how far he went, he always credited Miss Hayes with giving him his start. In a quiet corner of Riverton Academy, a plaque was installed in Eleanor's honor. It read, "In loving memory of Miss Eleanor Hayes, who taught us to see the beauty in ourselves." Though Eleanor had long since passed, her legacy lived on in every brushstroke, every note of music, and every child who dared to dream beyond the boundaries of Riverton. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to explore this fascinating story with us. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and God bless us all.